All right. Well, looks like we have everyone here in the room with us. Thank you to everyone who has taken a moment to introduce yourself in the chat box. It's so good to see all of you here on this webinar. We're really excited to spend some time with you this afternoon, and we are going to focus on the Child Care and Development Fund Standard Notice of Award. And to get us started, I am going to hand it over to Mr. Chris Felton with the Office of Grants Management within ACF. So Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And first and foremost, I'd just like to say welcome to everybody, and that I'm really excited to be here today, this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you're located. Just again, a quick introduction of myself. My name is Chris Felton. I'm a Grants Management Officer in the Office of Grants Management Economic Independence Portfolio. And I actually have the pleasure of being the National Lead Grants Officer for the Child Care and Development Fund, overseeing the grant awards for all state, territory, and tribal grantees in the grantee population for CCDF. I'm located and work out of our Boston, Mass. Regional office. And again, I'm really happy to be here today to go over what you or many of you have seen throughout federal fiscal year 2020, which is the standardization of the Notice of Award. I know we've heard from many of you with various questions, and I'm really, again, happy to have the opportunity to kind of go through the crosswalk from the old award letter that you were used to seeing and the new award that's being used in 2020. So I'll just add one other item. We do have time at the end for some questions and answers, but I'm more than happy to pause during a slide if somebody does have a pressing question, if they want to put it in the chat or something. If anybody's monitoring the chat, we can do it that way too, so you don't forget your question. So with that, I think we can dive into the next slide. Okay, so here's just a listing of the objectives that we have here today, so that we hope that you get out of today's meeting. And actually, I will say, I believe within the next couple of weeks, that this PowerPoint will be made available along with, I believe, a recording on the Training and Technical Assistance Network website. Please correct me if I'm misspeaking there, but I think those of you who want to look at this again and have it as a piece of information to reference, as a reference guide, you will have that for anybody who was unable to join, whether it's at your tribe or someone you may know, another grantee that will find this useful. So here's the objectives: to go over the background, why the change was made to the standard notice of award, going to the standard notice of award, and an overview of the standard NOA. And then, like I said, I think the most key part is that crosswalk from that, I'll call it the old letter that you were used to, in the new notice of award that was rolled out for federal fiscal year 2020. And then there were a few known issues that we all worked together to kind of overcome. Some of you may or may not have noticed them, but I just kind of wanted to cover those in case you had seen something you were uncertain of, and just to let you know how we in the Office of Grants Management address those issues throughout this fiscal year. And then we'll have some time for Q&A, and then I just have a reference slide at the end. So next slide, please. So many of you who inquired was wondering why OGM changed from the old award letter to this new standard notice of award. And so the driving force behind that was the 2014 Data Act requiring government-wide data standardization. Wanted to create efficiencies. And then there were some initiatives that really included some cross-departmental representation and input. Because if you could think across the Department of Health and Human Services, there's so many different grant awards in many of us were using separate notice of awards. So, I think we're trying to create efficiencies and to provide some standardization because it's quite costly and can be administratively troublesome to have all the different awarding agencies and different grant programs operating off of a different notice of award. So we can go to the next slide. So I kind of mentioned some of this already, so I won't list everything as it's written here on the slide. But, like I said, the previous notice of award, there was zero standardization to it. Again, so it posed a lot of administrative challenges and costly challenges for the federal government, especially as it got to systems and various modifications needing to be made to, again, all the different notice of awards that were across the variety of grant programs and funding agencies within HHS. So really the big objective was to standardize, to reduce that administrative burden, like I mentioned, and reduce some of the costs that were created by having a variety. So going to a standard NOA as driven and recommended by the Department of Health and Human Services really was the goal here. So next slide, please. And I think we covered, I covered this in some of the previous slides here at the beginning in this introduction, but really wanted to create efficiencies, get HHS-wide input, which we call here cross-departmental representation and input. Then we also, again, really a big theme in this whole initiative was to reduce administrative burden not only on the federal government, but you all, the grantee population, where majority of our grantees do not only operate one grant program, they operate a variety of grant programs across the HHS portfolio. Therefore, having a standard notice of award, there's one award, the accounting and finance departments, the program offices are operating off of one type of award. And I will say, for those of you who operate multiple grant programs, some of the grant programs rolled out this new standard notice of award throughout federal fiscal year 2020. The grant programs that did not, 2020 was really looked at as a pilot. Those that did not implement will be coming along in federal fiscal year 2021. So next slide. So when we standardize the notice of award across HHS, we're really looking, as it says here, some key data elements that already existed on the varying awards that were provided under each grant program to grantees. So, it does become difficult, I will admit, to try and encompass everything as it relates to every particular program and a standard notice of award, but really what we tried to capture was all the real key elements that are required in a grant award. Again, because prior there was zero standardization, and modifying the awards became quite time-consuming, costly, and very administratively burdensome. But I think, as you will all see as we go through the crosswalk, all the data elements that one was used to seeing on what I again call the old award letters, the old notice of awards, they're captured in the current new notice of award, just in a different format, and it does take some time to get used to. So we can go to the next slide, please. And so this slide here just kind of provides the Department of Health and Human Services action transmittal about the deployment and the rollout. As you can see here, 2020 was looked at, for federal fiscal year 2020 was looked at more of like a pilot, where the full rollout of the notice of award will be by the first quarter of federal fiscal year 2021. So that's the quarter beginning October 1st, 2020. So if you had some grant awards that you were operating outside of the Child Care and Development Fund that did not move to the Standard Notice of Award and their HHS awards, you'll see the standard notice being used coming up here for Q1 of federal fiscal year 2021. And as I noted previously, the new standard NOA preserves the very important data elements included on the older award letters, in particular for the Child Care and Development Fund. We can move to the next slide, please. And so I'm just going to pause maybe for a second here because we're going to have a picture of the notice of award and then kind of get into the crosswalk. So I don't know. I'll give a second. I don't see anybody typing in the chat, but I'll give it kind of another second to see if anybody has any question related to background in the implementation phase.
Chris, this is Melody. Just wanted to let you know that right now it looks like we have people who have introduced themselves in the chat box, and I don't see any questions specifically at this time.
Okay, great. So again, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. If you think of something along the way, be happy to discuss and provide an answer. So we'll keep going here, and here is the standard notice of award template with the structured information. It's a 2-page notice of award, and that would lengthen after that if the terms and conditions or any special conditions are quite lengthy. So the Child Care and Development Fund grant awards are awarded through what we call our funding system, the mandatory grants module. So there where you see MGM, MGM stands for the mandatory grants module. That's really internal. It's on the slide, but I just wanted you all to be aware what MGM stood for. And again, it's the mandatory grants module, and that's what we in the Office of Grants Management within the Administration for Children and Families, that's the system we're funding the awards through. Again, all the data elements are numbered, and you kind of go through. I think one of the key areas is kind of the box there where you've got a little line where it says award financial information, including share of total award budget as determined by formula. So there you will see, and what we'll also get into a little bit later is a total amount of federal funds obligated for the period, but then you'll also see the amount of funds obligated for the particular award. So that's one of the key areas and pieces of information there. And we can move to the next slide to show page 2. And again, so this is just the second page. Again, more financial information. Another key area, which we'll go through later, is that section that reads financial information. And a lot of that information is what should be very familiar to those of you who are accustomed to that old notice of award letter prior to federal fiscal year 2020. And then you have terms and conditions and remarks. Occasionally you will all see a special remark, and I truly encourage you all, before we get into the detailed crosswalk, it's something I really like to mention. I truly encourage everybody who is on this call and those in your organization who use these grant awards, we ask that you do read all the information. Sometimes there's some really key detail. Of course, the terms and conditions are very important. It's the requirements of the grant and compliance issues. But then sometimes there are some key details in the remarks section. And I know it's very easy for folks to just, flip to page 2 and say, hey, what funding stream is this? Mandatory, discretionary, and how much did we get in our Q1 or Q2 award? But I would encourage everybody to take the time to always read anything under the terms and conditions, and specifically if there's anything under the remarks, because usually under the remarks we're highlighting a key item. And so again, just encourage everybody to always be cognizant of that, because sometimes some key information could be missed. And with that, we go to the next slide. Okay. So here we'll get into that crosswalk as I've referenced multiple times so far. And the first item that I'd like to crosswalk is the recipient information. So at the top on the left, or excuse me, my left, as I'm looking at my screen here, former NOA is what I'm calling that old letter. And then the other side has a standard current NOA as discussed. And the first piece of information is your information. Grantee information is the grantee name and address. I will say we sometimes find that this information could be incorrect, or an organization has changed buildings in which they're operating out of. If you ever see something on the information in terms of address on your award that's incorrect, I'd encourage you to reach out to your assigned grants management specialist and let them know of that, and we can make the change in subsequent awards to ensure that we have correct information on those awards. So just a comment I wanted to point out, we've had inquiries and we're able to make the change on the back end in our mandatory grants module funding system. But again, I encourage you all to contact your assigned grants management specialist, and they will then be able to relay that information upward to me to ensure we capture that on future quarterly grant awards. So we can go to the next slide. So the next item we'll crosswalk is the Statutory Authority. As many of you may know, the Child Care and Development Fund is made up of multiple funding streams for you all. That you look at mandatory funding that's authorized by, we refer to Child Care Entitlement, and that is authorized by Title IV of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act. And so that used to be in the, first paragraph of the old NOA. And here it's in data element number 13, Statutory Authority, clearly identified on the new NOA there. So for the mandatory funds, you'll see the act, the PRWORA referenced. And then for your discretionary funds, it's a separate statutory authority, the Child Care and Development Block Grant Act, that authorizes that funding. So you'll see one of the two statutory authorities referenced, and again, it used to be in the body of the old letter in the first paragraph, now moved to item number 13. Could we move to the next slide, please? So I'll first apologize. It was hard to wanted to capture the information on the old letter on what's on the new standardized NOA, and it's kind of captured on two separate pages. So it was tough to kind of make the slide where the new NOA pages were larger. But I think I highlighted this earlier, and again, I think this is probably the areas that you all may be most concerned about is the financial information. And so on the old Notice of Award that was not standardized, kind of that red box under the body of the first paragraph was all the financial information, the appropriation number, the common accounting number, the annual allotment, the amount funded in the particular grant action, the cumulative award to date, the type of funds, whether it be mandatory or discretionary funds, and then the grant document number, which you may all know, starting in grant year 2019, for the Child Care and Development Fund, we went to multiple grant document numbers, so you are drawing down your funds based on the funding stream. So whether it be mandatory funding or the discretionary funding. So the grant document number is key as well. So that information that was in the old letter is split between page 1 and page 2. There's summary financial award information on page 1. And then on page 2, you have the real detailed financial information where you're seeing, again, the appropriation, the common accounting number, the allotment, the amount funded for that particular action, the cumulative award, and the grant document number and the type of funds that are there. So again, I think this is really where the most detailed information is regarding a particular award. So again, it's all important. I encourage everybody to read everything, but that's the key areas there that I know grantees are very concerned about. We can go to the next slide. So here we'll crosswalk the FAIN, which might be a new term for some of you, and the GDN. So the GDN here we have as a grant document number, and the FAIN is a federal accounting identification number. And the FAIN is kind of, I think of it, the Child Care and Development Fund, the way I describe this is almost like the FAIN is like the umbrella number of the overall award, and then the grant document number is kind of like subsets underneath that provide you information of what type of funding stream it is, mandatory or discretionary, and then that's how you draw down your funds for the tribal CCDF grant awards. And so whether it's mandatory funding, which is the grant document number ending CCDF, or the discretionary funding, which is the grant document number ending CCDD, both fall under the same FAIN. For your purposes, you'll see the FAIN at the very top of the award on page 1 and the grant document number on page 2 of the award. So you will see multiple grant document numbers, and when you're using the payment management system to draw funds down, you'll draw down, again, based on GDN, the grant document number, and whether you're drawing down mandatory funding or discretionary funding. We can go to the next slide. And so for federal agency contact information, prior on the old award, you can see there was just kind of a electronic signature that said e-sign there, and now we have information, federal agency awarding information, and data element number 9 and 10. It shows you the awarding agency contact information is myself, Chris Felton as the grants officer, and it has a director of the Office of Child Care there, Shannon Christian, listed as the head of program official, and then my signature blocked down on block 29. I will remind everybody, as just a point of clarification, we're always happy to help, but the best way to get through to us all and to contact the Office of Grants Management is, again, going through your assigned fiscal specialist. And I believe the Office of Child Care would agree the best way to get through to the Office of Child Care would be going through the assigned program specialist for your particular organization. And then whether it be the program or fiscal specialist will either be able to assist or know where to elevate any questions or concerns to. And so if you ever have a question on who your assigned specialist is, then you can definitely reach out. We try and keep keep that information up to date, and our specialists should, be contacting you, whether it be reporting or what have you. So again, if there is ever a question, please reach out to your assigned specialist, and they're always they're willing to help and very knowledgeable regarding a variety, not only child care regs, but just grant situations. So always happy to help. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. So the next item to crosswalk's the terms and conditions. In the old letter, you kind of have the last two paragraphs there references the terms and conditions, and here on the Standardized Notice of Award, it's on page 2. There's a full section called Terms and Conditions. And as you know, with the Child Care and Development Fund grants, there's usually a link in there that directs you not only to the general mandatory grant terms and conditions, it directs you to a link where you can also find the tribal terms and conditions. And for any grantee that may have a tribal construction award, the tribal construction terms and conditions is also located at the ACF website as well. You would have a separate award for tribal construction. Anyway, but still here, just wanted to point that out. And so again, I always highly encourage everybody, even though the financial information is easy to read and readily available on this award, I encourage you always to read the terms and conditions, just to make sure you fully understand the terms and conditions of the grant awards for when you draw down those funds, what you as an organization are agreeing to. And again, it's always a good refresher, and staff are sometimes new. So with all grant awards, I fully encourage a full read of everything that's on the award. So we could go to the next slide, please. And so the next portion is the individual grantee footnotes. And so a footnote is really specific to an individual organization. We can put those on this new standard NOA individually. On the old letter, there was no additional footnotes, no opportunity. So I think it's a nice section that we have at the bottom of page 1 of this Notice of Award, because if there's anything in particular about a given grantee that needs to be referenced on the legal Notice of Award, we have a space to do that here. And so it's on the bottom of page 1, a footnote. So again, highly encourage everybody to read all the elements that's on the Notice of Award. I would not say they're put there frequently, but on an occasion we do use them for various grantees, and when we send them out, our hope is that our grant specialist sending them to you all would highlight, hey, please see footnote 1, 2, or 3, or what have you. And so I just encourage you to double check that as well. So we can go to the next slide. So something else I had referenced earlier is different than a footnote. It's a batch remark. And here, this is something that we would use the batch remark. We want to apply it to the entire grantee population, to all of you receiving a tribal child care grant award, where the footnote is organizationally specific. And again, on the old Notice of Award letter, we didn't have an opportunity to put those additional remarks in there. Here, we do have an opportunity, and I'll give an example when we move to a further slide, on a remark that was in there to address one of the issues we confronted when we first rolled out in Q1 of federal fiscal year 2020, when we first rolled this standard NOA out. We did encounter an issue and was able to address it through a remark. So again, that's why I I'm very sorry that I keep repeating this, but I do truly encourage everybody to read the full page 1 and page 2 of the document, because sometimes, like I said, you can miss something, especially if we're trying to address an issue there, and it might prevent more confusion and questions that you may have. Okay, so I think we could move to the next slide, please. So that wraps up the crosswalk of the key data elements of what you are used to seeing on the old award letters, the old notice of awards, and to what you see currently on the new standard award. And I think hopefully it was illustrated that the information that you were seeing in the old award template, it's still there with some additional data elements. If a data element does not apply, you might see a NA for not applicable on the standardized award, because again, we're using it across the Department of Health and Human Services, so a data element that may have been needed for a couple of the grant programs may not be applicable to the Child Care and Development Funds. So those you'll see NA there. But I do hope the takeaway is could, hopefully have a sigh of relief to know that it really has all the data elements, just put in a different format, and it does take some time to get accustomed and to get used to. So the known issues that we encountered through grant year 2020 and how we addressed those issues. So the first one that I'll point out, we received many a question, that the allotment in the first awards were incorrect. And so, as I just noted, I would give an example of how we use the batch remarks. First, the allotments were incorrect because we were on what's called a continuing resolution, and the grant funding system was unable to accommodate the calculation within the system. And therefore, what we had to do was use what we call our master file to do the first quarter award calculations and go through multiple rounds of verifications to ensure proper awards. The back-end fix in the system was going to take too long, and we found it was of higher importance to get you all, the grantee population, your awards in the first quarter. So what we did was we addressed it through Remark, and we noted that the allotments were not complete at that point in time. We didn't have a full year of funding, and for the future awards, until we were able to make a fix, that allotment amount was left blank, and obviously you could rely on they're published now for fiscal year 2020, the tribal CCDF allocation tables that's posted on the Office of Child Care website. And so that was one issue we addressed in the first quarter, and just again wanted to point these out. You may have seen them and recognize them, or now after this training you might go back and take a closer look at your new standardized notice of award, and just kind of wanted to point these out for your reference. So when you're looking at those, if you see something that looks a little off, we did understand that we did identify a few issues again in the pilot year and how we addressed those. The second issue was the data element for grant administrator. Many had outdated grant administrator names on the notice of awards, and therefore what we decided in conjunction with the Office of Child Care and the Office of Grants Management decided was to just rename data element number 7 grant administrator, rather than trying to constantly update contacts and contact information, whether it be we had an outdated name or because of staff turnover. We just found that it was best to address it by using the term grant administrator under data element number 7. And we do have your grantee organizational address at the top. Like I said, if that's incorrect, please reach out to your specialist to let them know that, and we can address that. But for specific names, you will not see a specific project director, principal investigator name on the award. You'll just see the general term grant administrator under data element 7. And so one other issue that we did have to address, and it was identified in the first quarter of awards, when we discussed the statutory authority, how there's 2 separate statutory authorities authorizing the funding streams under the Child Care and Development Fund. We were unable to toggle between the 2 CFDAs tied to the statutory authority and the CFDA program title that was tied to the statutory authority. So for the first round of awards in quarter 1 of 2020, the Child Care Entitlement CFDA number and program title was what was shown on the Notice of Awards. Again, we found that it was more beneficial. Identify this to you all, the grantee population. This was corrected after.
Sorry, this is Melody. I just wanted to let you know that your audio got really soft.
Okay, is it better now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there. Did I cut out at some point so I know where to pick up, or could you hear me somewhere?
Yeah, we heard you for the most part. I think it was just the last, maybe last couple sentences that you said that were explaining about
Okay, sure. So I apologize if I'm repetitive here, but I just want to make sure that you did hear everything. And thanks for letting me know. I kind of went faint there for a second. In quarter 1, we only had the Child Care Entitlement CFDA and program title, and we thought it was more important for you all to receive your money for the first quarter to ensure that program services were being provided to recipients that you all serve. So what we did was we processed the awards with the Child Care Entitlement CFDA and CFDA program title. For all future awards after quarter 1, we had the back-end fix happen in the mandatory grants module, so all awards went out with the applicable CFDA and CFDA program title, whether it was the mandatory funds under the Child Care Entitlement or the discretionary funds under the Child Care and Development Block Grant. So those are kind of the those are the 3 major known issues that we dealt with during the rollout of this standard notice of award. Again, where it was considered a pilot year, we understood that we were going to face some challenges. Overall, I thought, the rollout went well. I think some would agree, some may disagree, but when you do something for the first time, there's a learning curve, and we appreciated all the grantees' patience and really learning and understanding the new format. And we were happy and appreciate when we get questions, because that means we know folks are kind of reading the awards, and we're, like I said, we're always happy to help and support. So we could go to the next slide, which is our question slide. And so if before we dive into questions, if I can just make one more comment. After the question slide, if you could just, if it's possible, move one slide beyond questions, because if we get a bunch of questions, I don't want to forget to mention this. This is just a slide I put in here for everybody for reference. Again, at the beginning of this presentation, I noted that many of you all have multiple grant programs. So if you only work on child care, you fall under the economic independence portfolio of the Office of Grants Management. But a year ago, the Office of Grants Management reorganized to 7 separate portfolios. And so if you have multiple grants across ACF, this is just an information slide. And the PDF there shows all of the OGM portfolios and the grant programs that fall under the portfolios. So I just thought it would be a nice reference slide for some of you that you could check out when made available if you're uncertain of some of where your other ACF grants may lie. So just wanted to mention that before we get into any questions. So with that, I'll then pause and we can go to questions.
All right, this is Melody again. Chris, this was really helpful. I have one question that came into the chat box, so I wanted to circle back to that really quick. So Elizabeth asked, what is for Q1? That was in reference, it was towards the beginning of the presentation when you were first talking about the crosswalk.
I don't. Can you ask the question again? I'm sorry. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
You said, I'm sorry, I just didn't quite hear it.
Sorry, my audio is having issues today. Hopefully you guys can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Elizabeth asked, what are the dates for Q1?
Okay, so dates for Q1, when I was referencing quarters, I was referencing federal fiscal year quarters. So Q1 starts October 1st, and for grant year 2020, that was October 1st, 2019, and then that first quarter ends December 31st, 2019. And again, that would be the first quarter of federal fiscal year 2020. So 10/1/2020 is, yeah, so 10/1/2020 starts Q1 of federal fiscal year 2021.
Wonderful. It's typing into the chat box, so we'll see what other come up. And then also, Chris, I wanted to just point out that while you were going over the slides, Craig had put some information into the chat box. So I wasn't sure if you wanted us to read after we questions, in case people are calling in onto the webinar via their phone. Okay, let's see. We have a question. So the next question is, Kim is asking, will the NOAs be sent out quarterly?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So the NOAs are issued quarterly. Our grant staff send them quarterly. If for some reason you're not receiving the quarterly grant award and you feel like you're missing some grant awards, please reach out to your grants management specialist and ask them to resend those awards to you, because those are issued quarterly and the grant staff are asked to send those out quarterly. So if that's not happening, please let us know, and we'd be happy to get you copies of your award letters.
All right, thank you, Chris. And are listening. See if you had
Okay, Melody's audio went out for her, so I can read any of the questions that you're typing into the chat boxes. This is Shar from the National Center as well. So I see some people are typing. So Brianna had a question. Who do we contact if there is a discrepancy between the NOA and the PMS?
If there are any discrepancies that you think are there, you should always start with your grants management specialist. I have a follow-up question to that question, though. When you say discrepancy, are you asking if there's a discrepancy of what's stated on the notice, the standard notice of award, and the authorized amount in PMS? What is meant by discrepancy between NOA and PMS?
So Brianna, would you like to take yourself off of mute and give Chris a little bit further information? You can take yourself off of mute by pressing *6.
Okay, this is Brianna. I was trying to find the email because I don't have access to the PMS system. The grants department does for my tribe, and so I only see the NOA, so I send them to them. But I recently got an email from them saying there was a difference in what the NOA says and what the PMS system says, I guess, for the authorized drawdowns. And so that was like, I can't see that system, and I give them what they have. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to find an email from them.
Yeah, that's okay. So I do understand the question, and I would encourage the grant staff in your organization to reach out to the assigned grants management specialist. Sometimes one of the issues we found is, again, as noted during the presentation, the awards come through, and again, there's CCDF for the mandatory funding stream and CCDD for the discretionary funding stream. And I'm not saying this is the case, it's just a potential. We've had folks say, hey, we don't have all our funds under CCDF, and you wouldn't in this case, or because the funds are awarded under separate grant document numbers, so they were only looking under one grant document number, CCDF, which was the mandatory funds, not realizing there was a CCDD grant document number for the discretionary. So there's a possibility that's the case, but for us to really get a good understanding, if you all want to send an email to the assigned grant specialist with the award and what's being seen in PMS, we could best assist you that way.
Okay, thank you. I will do that.
I see that Elizabeth has a couple questions. Elizabeth, can you take yourself off of mute by pressing *6 and go ahead and ask your question? Yep, *6. We'll give her a second to see if she can get off of mute. So you just type that into your phone. I see Asara is typing something, so she is going to help you with that. So Elizabeth, I'm going to ask your first question. Oh, she's only on her computer. Okay. So I will ask the question for you. So Chris, her first question is, when will the NOA for fiscal year 21 be received?
Yeah, we don't have an exact date at this point in time. However, it will depend on congressional funding, where the child care entitlement was passed under a continuing resolution, so the mandatory funding for those receiving mandatory funding, there's a continuing resolution that has been passed. We do have to wait for funds to be available in our account to then make the grant awards. I'm simplifying the process here, but we don't have a specific date of when they'll be received, but we're hopeful it will be within the first week or two of October 2020. But again, that will be driven by some of the process that happens before us in the Office of Grants Management and Office of Child Care can issue the awards. But we're hoping to track to very early October. So sorry I don't have a specific date, but for mandatory funding, we're tracking there. And I haven't seen anything yet on the Child Care and Development Block Grant funding, which falls under, which the discretionary funds fall under. So I don't have a specific answer for you there as it relates to the discretionary funds.
Okay, that is definitely understandable when you're working with Congress. So Elizabeth has a second question. It is, can you please explain the difference between the award this action and the cumulative grant award to date? So
Sure.
just a recap of that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So the award this action is the amount of grant funds you're receiving for that particular award for that given date. So I'll just create a little example here. We might be giving a Q2 award, and maybe in the first quarter you receive $50,000. And in the Q2 award, you're going to receive, say, $10,000. So on this award, in the example I just created, the Q2 award, the award this action would be the $10,000 that you're receiving. And then the cumulative award would be the Q1 award of $50,000 plus the Q2 award of $10,000. So your cumulative grant award to date would be $60,000. So it's really just tracking the amount of money you're receiving on a particular action, and then the amount of money you received for that grant period to the date of that action. Hopefully that little fictitious example helped.
Thank you, Chris, for
And then I should say
explaining that.
Yeah, and sorry, if that wasn't clear, please let me know, because I'd be happy to try and explain it in a different way. Just want to make sure I'm addressing the question for you.
I see Kim typing into the chat box. Elizabeth, if you could just let us know in the chat box if that answered your question, that would be helpful. We have about 5 minutes remaining, so now is a great time to type in your question or take yourself off of mute and ask any questions of Chris that you may have. So Kim is typing into the chat box. So Kim says, so the award is the award this action breaks down what is being awarded versus what will be awarded? Question mark.
No, so the award this action breaks down what's being awarded. That is correct. It's not versus what will be awarded. It's what was awarded to that date. So again, if you were awarded $50,000 in the first quarter and $10,000 in the second quarter, the award to date would be $60,000. So the combination of the two quarters. It doesn't include what you be receiving in the future in quarters 3 and 4. That's really what was supposed to be under the allotment, which is the annual amount. And as I noted in the presentation, those at this point, because of a system issue, are being left blank, and you can rely on the tribal funding allocation tables published on the OCC website for what the annual award will look like. So again, just to reiterate that, the cumulative grant award is what was awarded for a given, up to that given date of the award. It does not include any future awards you would receive in that given grant year. Hopefully, let me know if that helped or not.
I also see that Elizabeth is on the phone now, so if she would like to take herself off of mute and ask any other questions, that would be great. And I also see Kim posted, okay, I've got it. cumulative is the key word. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Elizabeth.
We can hear you, Elizabeth.
So I'm just trying to figure this and try to make sense of it with our accounting system. So just to be sure that I have it right. So then award this action, and I'm just going to read off of what I have here. So I am looking at a federal award date of July 2nd, 2020, which is the fourth quarter of FY 2020, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So then in the cumulative grant award to date, I have 542,724. So what that also represents is the total allocation. Is that correct? Because we're in the fourth quarter.
For that particular funding stream, since we're in the fourth quarter, it should, the cumulative award to date, if we have funded everything, and I don't believe we had to do multiple fourth quarter awards, should tie to the annual allocation.
Okay. So then award this action is $37,090. So what I'm trying to figure out, what exactly does that represent? Does that represent what is remaining to be drawn down of the 542?
No, that does not. What is on any notice of award does not relate to funds available to be drawn down in the payment management system. How you find the funds available to be drawn in the payment management system, you'd have to log into the payment management system and pull up that particular grant award that you're referencing and look at what the total authorized amount was and what the total drawdowns have been. You'll only find that in the payment management system. The 30, I apologize, I'm not recalling the exact amount you just shared, but I think it was approximately $30,000 amount, this award. That $30,000 is what is being given on that award dated 7/2/2020. So we processed an award on July 2nd in the amount of, I'm going to use round numbers here, $30,000 to you all. So that is the amount that's going to be deposited into your organization's payment management system account for that fourth quarter award. The $500,000 is the accumulative amount that you've received over the 4 quarters. And then for funds available for you to draw down, you would have to reference the payment management system under the given grant award, grant document number to see how much funds your organization has drawn down, and then against what's available as authorized.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I will just say, if you go back and you reference the slides and you're looking at the award and it's still unclear, please, I really do encourage you to reach out to your assigned grant specialist too, and they could provide you some targeted, Q&A and discussion regarding that, not only the award and the payment management system. That's what we're here for. So if you feel you need that after the call going forward, we'd be happy to do that.
Is the grant specialist the same as the grants management officer? Because
no, the grants officer is me, so my name would be on all the awards.
Okay.
So your grant specialist is someone different who is assigned to your organization to not only do the financial report reviews, what have you, but to answer questions like this on an ongoing basis. And if you don't know who your grant specialist is, please reach out and we can make an introduction for you.
Yeah, I know who it is. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So Elizabeth, thank you for asking all of your questions. So one of the easiest ways to request TA through OGM, the Office of Grants Management, is to reach out to your regular program specialist, and I'm sure most of you know who they are. If not, please let us know and we can help you. And they can contact your Office of Grants Management specialist to specifically help you with those details. So we want to take and make this as easy as possible for all of you. And thank you again for asking questions. Are there any other remaining questions out there that you would like to ask Chris while he's on the phone? And I apologize for earlier saying we only had 5 minutes. We actually had 35 minutes, so we do have time if there's anything you would like to ask. So I'm going to give you some time to type them into the chat or take yourself off of mute. But while we're waiting for anyone who wants to speak by pressing *6, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what the National Center has been planning and some additional technical assistance opportunities coming your way, specifically designed around fiscal. So on Monday, October 20th, oh, nope. So the National Center on Tribal Early Childhood Development will host 2 question and answer sessions where we're going to discuss various fiscal topics, including the Coronavirus Aid and Relief and Economic Security, the CARES Act, spending requirements, obligation and liquidation strategies, and strategies to maintain effective communication between your fiscal staff and your program staff. These sessions are scheduled on Tuesday, October 6th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and Tuesday, October 20th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time as well. The same topics will be repeated across both sessions. So please register for whatever day works best for you. So both of these Q&A sessions, it will be a repeat on the 26th, or on the 20th. So make sure you schedule for which one fits best for you. And Yasara has been so helpful and put the registration links right into the chat box. So if you click on them, it will take you right to the registration site. We also have on Monday, October 26th, the Office of Child Care and the National Center on Tribal Early Childhood Development will launch 5 new Fiscal on-demand sessions. So that means they'll be available at any time you wish to watch a session. So you can just log in and watch the session. You can also invite other members of your staff or fiscal departments as well to watch the sessions. So the topics of the sessions are, Session 1 will be an introduction to Tribal CCDF fiscal management. This is especially helpful for new CCDF administrators or new fiscal department staff. Session 2 will be using your CCDF plan and other tools for justification purposes. So justifying some of your expenditures to your fiscal department or the Office of Child Care. Session 3 will be demonstration of the budgeting template. So our team has a budget template that would be very useful in creating each year's budget. So that will be Session 3. Session 4 will be a demonstration of the projecting CCDF spending for direct services tool, so that we can, grantees can look at their direct services and see if they could afford to offer additional services or maybe adjust their payment rates. And session 4 is a demonstration of session 5 is projection of quality expenditures and a budgeting demonstration. So we'll be taking a deeper dive into the fiscal aspects of your quality spending. So to receive an email notification when the Fiscal On-Demand sessions are available, you're going to register at an Adobe link, and Yasara will be getting that information to you. And then I want to just mention, we do have a few more weeks of the COVID TA tribal office hours on Wednesdays and Fridays. So if that's something you're interested in attending, we would love to have you. We've had great participation so far. So to register for Group 1, Yasara has put in the link into the chat box, which is on Wednesdays, and to register for Group 2, which is on Fridays, she's also included that link. All right. So I don't see any more questions in the chat box. We want to thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today. The information was really useful and helpful in understanding the Notice of Grant Awards. We really appreciate you taking your time with the grantees. So do you have any closing remarks, Chris?
Yeah, I'd just like to say again, thanks for having me here, and you know, we in the Office of Grants Management love collaborating with the Office of Child Care and you all, the grantee population. So hopefully we'll get some opportunities down the road to do some more training and chatting with you all. And again, I truly encourage everybody on the phone. If you do have questions, please always reach out to your grant specialist. They're very knowledgeable, more than happy to help. And if you have never been introduced to your grant specialist or need to know who that is, you can always reach out, and we're happy to make the introductions because they're more than happy to support. So again, thanks for having us here today, and greatly appreciate the time, and hopefully you found it useful.
Thank you so much, Chris. So with that, we hope you all have a great day, and we will be ending our webinar here shortly.